How's it going, guys? Todd from Toddtronics. Today we're going to take a quick first impressions look at the all-new Anbernic Rg557. Now, I hesitate to call this a full review because the device hasn't really been out retail for very long, and I've ran into some software bugs and quirks that I'm hoping will be patched out going forward before a full retail release. Now, a lot of people are going to realize that this device looks very familiar, and if you're not up to the news, this is a new handheld. However, it does look identical to last year's model from Anbernic, the Rg556. Now, this device I did review as well, and I did really like this handheld. However, there were a lot of things about it that really held it back from being great. Things like cardinal snapping on the joysticks, as well as just not performing nearly as well as other handhelds that were releasing around the same time. However, this one is posed to have quite a lot of performance on the table, and in my testing, you'll see that we got some great results, especially compared to this one here. However, some things that I do need to address about this handheld are going to just kind of sour that mood for a lot of people right out the gate. So I just want to start off before we even get into the video. Anbernic is asking $250 for this device. And at the time of recording, there are tons of other devices out on the market around that price point that are definitely going to be the same, if not better than this handheld. So it makes it a very hard recommend. However, some people do really love the ergonomics and the shape of this device. So I figured we should still really take a look at this device and kind of put it under some scrutiny to see if it's worth your hard-earned dollars or not. Now, real quick, going over the specs of the device. For the display here, we have a 1920 by 1080p AMOLED display, and it is honestly quite gorgeous. The colors are very, very saturated, and the brightness is a lot higher than it was on the past device here, the 556. I don't know if they're using the same screen and they're just slightly tuned differently. However, it is a noticeable change, at least compared to my other unit that I have here. And for the insides of the device, we have a MediaTek Dimensity 8300 processor, as well as a Mali G615 GPU, 12 gigabytes of LPDDR5X RAM, 256 gigabytes of onboard storage, Android 14 for our operating system, and for connectivity, we have Wi-Fi 6E, as well as Bluetooth 5.3. Now, on paper, that means this should be quite a performant device. However, again, that Mali GPU inside of the Dimensity chip is going to hold us back on certain emulation situations, as well as even native Android apps. Now, as we start to take a look at the device, the first thing I wanted to showcase was the screen. However, I did want to point out and mention a couple things here. Out of the box, mine came with screen burn-in. I don't know if you're able to guess or tell what this is, but if I load up a solid gray background, it's a lot more easy to see. But yeah, there's definitely some sort of screen burn-in going on here, and this was completely out of the box. I hadn't even got a chance to use it. I'm not exactly sure if maybe this was something that they were testing around before they sent it out, and maybe they left something going, but there's definitely some letters here. If anyone can make out what they think that this is, make sure you comment it down below, because I've been kind of staring at this the last few days trying to figure out what they left on the screen so long that it could have burnt in. And continuing to look at the screen here, the next thing that some people may have noticed is there's some serious diagonal flickering going on this display. However, I do want to let you know this is not something that can be seen by the naked eye. This is only being picked up by my camera. Now, this is what's called PWM, or pulse wave modulation. This is how some OLED panels handle their brightness, but it can cause some eye strain depending on how sensitive the individual is. It does tend to get better at the higher brightness levels. I'm going to blow out the image a little bit, so it might be hard to see on camera. But once you have this device at full brightness, it seems like the flickering completely goes away. And the more you lower it, it seems like the more it becomes noticeable, or it kind of speeds up a little bit. However, it is worth noting that not every OLED panel is going to experience this. As you can see here, I have an Odin 2 Portal, which also has an AMOLED display, and it doesn't have that flickering issue at all at any of the levels of brightness. So if that is something that you think you may be sensitive to, maybe you should look at a different device. Now, moving over to the controls of the device, I wanted to start off with the joysticks for 3 reasons in particularly. If you take a look here, you can see that the joystick topper is actually pretty comically small. This is smaller than even something like your Nintendo Switch joysticks, and they've elected to go with white for this here white model. And to be honest with you, I'm not a fan, because as you can see, I like to eat snacks when I use my handhelds. I mean, they're supposed to be a convenience thing. You know, you want to lay in bed and play your games, not sit up at the couch or at a table. And I've already managed to stain my left joystick, and it really, really makes this device just kind of look gross and not appealing. So that was something I was really bothered by. However, I do think that it is kind of funny that they had these perfectly good size sticks and they decided to go with smaller toppers. They don't really stick out a whole lot, as you can see, so maybe that was to help it become more pocketable. However, I don't find it to be a problem as far as the size goes, and I have been told that the retail units will ship with some interchangeable thumbstick toppers. Hopefully, I can get my hands on a set of those soon so that way I can stop looking at this because I already feel gross and guilty that I managed to mess it up. And just to overcomplicate things, at some point last year, after the release of the Anbernic Rg556, there was a lot of controversy about those thumbsticks and their snapping behavior, so we got a few more handhelds from Anbernic like this one here, which is the Anbernic Rg406V, and this one came with the perfect analog sticks. Now, as you could probably already tell, they stick out quite a deal further. However, these have a great range of travel to them, and the tops actually come off and can be used with different replacement sticks, and they have none of that weird snappiness that was going on. So I'm not really sure why Anbernic elected to make yet another revision to their sticks and not include these. Maybe it's just because they are so large that they wanted something that might be a little bit more sleek and pocketable. However, I really wish that we had these sticks on the new 557. But the good news is that these sticks are actually quite functional. Now, Anbernic is calling these high-resolution anti-magnetic interference capacitive joysticks. And I think the reason for that is because there's been a lot of news lately about magnetic interference with Hall effect sticks, and so a lot of people are kind of trying to steer clear of that technology until they figure out how to kind of fix that in these smaller devices. However, I'm very happy to report that they do not have any sort of cardinal snapping, and they're actually really accurate and precise, which is really good, especially considering that they have such small travel. And just to give you a better understanding of what an actual improvement these new joysticks are, this is the Anbernic Rg556, the one that came before it, and there is such bad cardinal snapping on these joysticks that it's borderline unusable. Now, as far as the rest of the controls on the device go, I think everything overall that we're working with here is quite good with a couple small caveats. So your face buttons here, these are all great. They're quiet. They are easy to push in. They got a nice size going on. I don't love the spacing. I wish they were maybe spaced out just a little bit more, but I understand we're kind of working with a cramped space here. Down below, we have start and select. And then on this side here, we have our Android /home key. And then this one here is going to be for your Anbernic launcher. Now, I don't use the built-in Anbernic launcher. I usually opt for something else. And then if we go up top, we have our shoulder buttons, which are very loud and clicky. I'll put it up to the camera now so you can hear what I'm talking about. So that's kind of a bummer because the rest of the device is really quiet and those bumpers are just absolutely super loud. Now, we do have analog triggers here, and I'm actually a big fan of these triggers. They have a pretty tight spring on them compared to other handhelds and controllers that I've used, but for playing racing games and things of that nature, I think it's going to help you to get a little bit more precision, and it's not so tight that I find it to be fatiguing at all. And the ergonomic bump out that we have here on the side just makes this thing so comfortable. This is easily the most comfortable handheld that I've ever used ergonomics wise. I mean, it does kind of make it a little bit big and awkward, but I think it's well worth it to have that extra comfort. And moving over to some gameplay and performance testing, I just want to state how important this control layout really is. A lot of people were anticipating the Retroid Pocket 5 and were really excited for that device, but once they finally got it in their hands, they realized it was an ergonomic nightmare. And even though this device might be a little bit harder to carry around because of those ergonomic bump outs, having that stick placement up top and just having the overall design that they've chose here is really doing it a lot of favors as far as me wanting to actually pick up this device and use it over other handhelds that I have. And honestly, the more I threw at this thing and the more it handled it, it kept impressing me. This is a noticeable power uplift over the 556 and the 406 handhelds from Anbernic. I was actually shocked how many games that I expected to not run or to have a lot of crazy frame rate dips were just running perfectly fine. And I would go in and I would upscale them a little further and see that they were still playing at full speed. And I just couldn't believe it. I mean, I know that this chip is definitely more powerful than what we had in the previous handhelds, but I was just kind of worried that I was going to run into a ton of issues. And I'll get into that a little bit more in the video, but for the most part, most of my games were running amazing. I was able to get them scaled up to the 1080p display that we have here, and I was just having a good time. Games like Automodelista, I was actually able to push up to a 4x resolution, which is amazing because this device does have video out. So if this is something you wanted to connect to a TV, it's really nice to be able to get a nice crisp HD picture out of it. But there is a little bit of wonkiness going on with the compatibility of this chip. In particular, with certain games on certain emulators, I'm just not able to hit full speed, which really doesn't make any sense to me, even at native resolution. But switching over to the opposite platform, I'm able to play that same game, which is a decent workaround for now. And again, that's going to come down to the optimizations in this chip. And the fact that some of these Android emulators have slow development or no development at all in the case of Nether SX2 for PlayStation 2. So it's just one of those kind of things that you're going to have to deal with. Unfortunately, it would have been nice if Anbernic would have went with something with broader compatibility for other systems like Nintendo Switch and even Android apps. Something like a Snapdragon would have been great, but for whatever reason, they were able to get their hands on this chip, and that's what we've got. I did run into a couple other weird issues. For example, this one particular level on SSX Tricky with snow would really cause a lot of issues to the point where I couldn't even run it on the native resolution. But the odd thing was being able to play this exact same level on the underpowered 556 that we got from before with absolutely no problems. So again, there's more to the story than just getting some raw power upgrades with this device. There's obviously some compatibility issues that we're going to run into from time to time. Now, there's plenty more to test and explore with this device, but unfortunately, with the market conditions that we have right now with all the tariffs, I'm not even sure if this will fully come to the US market. I do want to take some more time to make another video with this device, so if there's something that you really want to see tested on here, make sure you comment it down below. I do read everybody's comments and try to get back to everybody as quickly as possible. But my overall thoughts on this device is I really do like it. I think there's some small drawbacks that we'll have to see if get ironed out in the future. I'm really not sure about the future of this handheld at the price point that they're asking at $250, especially now that we have those, price surges and shipping issues coming in with all of these tariffs. If that's something that gets resolved, would this be a good handheld for $250? I'm not entirely sure, to be honest. I think we do have some better compatibility with other handhelds. Something like an Odin 2 might be worth picking up, especially because some of those have been out a little bit longer. So you might be able to find them already stateside on the secondhand market or, being sold by a local retailer. But that's going to leave it here for this video today, guys. If you're new here, make sure you subscribe down below. And again, feel free to comment anything you want to see tested or something you'd like to see me make a video on, and we'll see you next time.